What if I told you that real human adults with jobs, cars, and presumably functioning brains have actually called supermarket managers to complain that the lobster tank made eye contact with them, that the floor was thinking about being wet, and that the store's Wi-Fi name guest felt personally offensive? These are not made up. These are not jokes. These are real complaints from real customers who walked into a grocery store and expected the experience of a 5-star resort with a personal butler. And we found 49 of them. If you thought you'd seen the peak of human audacity, buckle up. Because what's coming in this video will make you question everything you know about people. And honestly, maybe about yourself too. And if you don't subscribe right now, we will personally call the manager on you. 1. The self-checkout machine finished the transaction and cheerfully announced, "Thank you for shopping with us," in what felt like the most passive-aggressive tone ever recorded inside a grocery store. A formal complaint was filed at the customer service desk, demanding a written apology from the machine itself. The manager explained that the machine was simply programmed to be polite. The response to that explanation was that polite and sarcastic sound, completely identical, coming from a screen, and someone at corporate needs to fix that before next visit. 2. That squeaky cart from aisle 3 basically announced the entire shopping trip to everyone present, including the ex standing near the yogurt section, looking suspiciously calm and unbothered. The noise followed every single turn like a personal embarrassment soundtrack that nobody asked for. A formal complaint was filed stating that squeaky carts should be immediately removed from circulation or at minimum assigned only to shoppers who have absolutely no exes currently living within the same zip code. 3. The freezer aisle delivered a full Arctic experience that nobody came dressed for. Light clothing and sandals were a personal choice made at home. The store never once warned anyone that shopping for frozen peas would require actual survival gear and a heavy winter coat. A complaint was filed requesting that the store install a warning sign at the entrance. Shoppers deserve to know before walking in that both hands will lose all feeling somewhere between the frozen waffles and the ice cream section. 4. Buying a fully cooked rotisserie chicken felt like a genuine betrayal the moment the packaging was opened at home. The whole point of stopping by was to have cooking options. The store went ahead and made every single decision without any consultation whatsoever. A complaint was filed explaining that some people enjoy feeling involved in the process. Selling a bird that is already completely finished removes all participation. It takes the joy out of dinner entirely, and that is simply not acceptable on a weeknight. 5. The store playlist went full nostalgia mode and started playing oldies back to back through every speaker in the building. By the time the cereal aisle was reached, every questionable life decision from the past 15 years had been mentally revisited. A complaint was filed holding the store directly responsible for the emotional spiral that occurred near the granola bars. Future playlists need to avoid songs that make shoppers stop walking entirely. Nobody comes to a grocery store to have a breakdown next to the oatmeal. 6. Those bananas sitting in the produce section were simply the wrong shade of yellow, and that was the entire problem. Not too green, and definitely not too spotty. Somewhere in a very specific middle zone that is almost impossible to explain out loud, yet completely recognizable the moment it appears. A complaint was filed stating that the produce team needs to do significantly better. Supplying bananas at an unacceptable ripeness level is a direct failure. Some customers have standards that cannot be compromised over something as basic as fruit color. 7. The floor near Register 4 was completely dry and totally normal looking, but something about it felt deeply suspicious and unsettling. No wetness was present at all. The energy of potential wetness was absolutely there though, and that should count for something legally. A complaint was filed explaining that floors should not only be physically safe but should also feel emotionally safe. Mentally preparing to slip on nothing while carrying a full basket of groceries is still a traumatic experience. Management owes everyone in that situation a formal written acknowledgement. 8. That fresh bakery sign hanging above the bread section set a very specific expectation that the store failed to deliver on completely. The loaves had technically been baked that morning. That sounded acceptable until someone did the math and realized morning was now 6 hours ago. A complaint was filed arguing that bread baked 6 hours prior cannot legally or morally be described as fresh. The sign needs to either be updated every single hour or taken down permanently with a full public apology attached. 9. The shopping cart assigned at the entrance was enormous and completely disproportionate for a normal weekly grocery run. Every single item placed inside immediately disappeared into the oversized basket. The entire haul looked tragically small and emotionally insufficient by the time checkout was reached. A complaint was filed requesting that smaller cart options be placed near the entrance. Reasonably sized grocery trips should not end up looking like a personal cry for help. The cart made the whole experience feel like a public announcement of life going poorly. 10. Asking where the pasta was located should have resulted in a personal guided tour directly to the correct aisle. Instead, one finger was pointed in a vague general direction. The employee continued doing whatever they were doing without any further effort or eye contact. A complaint was filed stating that pointing is not customer service. A store charging these prices should be providing full escort service from the question point straight to the shelf. A pointed finger helps nobody find the right pasta shape, and that is a fact. 11. Walking into a fully rearranged store without any prior warning is the kind of experience that leaves genuine emotional damage on an otherwise normal shopping day. The pasta section had completely vanished, and cleaning products had moved into its spot like they owned the entire aisle. A 10-minute grief walk happened through the old familiar location before reality finally set in, and the new layout was reluctantly accepted. Corporate needs to understand that loyal customers memorize store layouts over years, and dismantling that without a simple email first is an unforgivable betrayal. 12. Printed on the back of a cereal box in aisle 4 was a puzzle so embarrassingly simple that putting it down and walking to customer service felt like the only reasonable response available. 6 oversized pieces forming a cartoon sun is not a challenge for anyone who has graduated past the 2nd grade. Adults purchase cereal in significant quantities and deserve mental respect during their breakfast hours. A formal complaint was filed requesting that future cereal boxes include something requiring actual cognitive effort before the milk even gets poured. 13. Nothing on earth prepares a person for automatic doors that explode open at full aggressive speed the moment a foot barely touches the entrance mat. The emotional support energy drink nearly launched clean out of both hands from the sheer violence of the air blast. The entire shopping trip was emotionally compromised before a single item made it into the basket. A formal complaint was filed requesting that door opening speeds be adjusted to something genuinely calm and welcoming, because being blasted with air is not a greeting anyone deserves. 14. 3 cents were quietly taken from a loyal customer at this exact store during a transaction back in 2019, and absolutely nobody ever made it right or even acknowledged it happened. Years passed by slowly, but the memory of that overcharge never once faded into the background. A return visit finally happened, and the original receipt was produced directly from a jacket pocket at the customer service desk while the cashier stared in complete silence. Some financial wounds simply do not heal with time, and 3 cents is still 3 cents. 15. 16 items were loaded into the basket on a day when the express lane sign clearly and boldly read 15 items or fewer. One single can of beans created a moral crisis that completely derailed the checkout experience and left everyone involved feeling uncomfortable. There needs to be a grace item policy introduced immediately for situations exactly like this one, because nobody should walk out of a grocery store feeling like a rule-breaking monster simply for grabbing one extra pantry item during an otherwise perfectly reasonable shopping trip. 16. 11 full years of loyal and consistent spending on a name-brand pasta sauce came crashing down completely the moment the store version was accidentally purchased and tasted absolutely identical in every possible way. The fork was set down slowly, and the silence in the kitchen was deafening. Every grocery receipt from the past decade suddenly felt like documented evidence of a very expensive and avoidable mistake. A formal complaint was filed demanding acknowledgement of the emotional and financial damage caused by this discovery, along with some reasonable form of compensation. 17. Making direct and sustained eye contact with a lobster through tank glass while simply trying to locate the shrimp section is not something anyone mentally prepares for during a routine Tuesday grocery run. The lobster just sat there staring with an expression that felt genuinely accusatory and deeply personal. Dinner plans changed completely on the spot as the appetite disappeared within seconds of that exchange. A complaint was filed requesting that the lobster tank be repositioned to face a wall because customers should not feel judged by their potential dinner. 18. Ice cream was purchased from the frozen aisle with every intention of heading straight home and putting it away responsibly. The parking lot had other plans entirely. The phone came out for what genuinely felt like 2 minutes and somehow transformed into 45 minutes of uninterrupted scrolling. By the time the engine finally started, the ice cream had fully melted into a warm puddle, sitting sadly at the bottom of the grocery bag. A full refund was requested along with a formal request for warning labels on all frozen products. 19 2 jars of pasta sauce arrived home because of a buy one, get one free promotion, when only one was ever needed or wanted in the first place. The second jar took up valuable kitchen shelf space for 4 solid months and silently judged everyone who walked past it during dinner preparation. A complaint was filed explaining that promotional pricing creates an unfair psychological pressure to acquire products that serve absolutely no real purpose in the household. Trapping customers into unwanted purchases through clever mathematics is manipulative, and the store owes a formal explanation. 20. Every single movement through the chip aisle was being carefully tracked by a camera mounted directly overhead, and the feeling of being watched made an already stressful decision feel completely unbearable. Choosing between regular and barbecue-flavored chips is already a high-pressure situation without being made to feel like a person of interest in a snack-related investigation. A formal complaint was filed requesting that cameras be redirected somewhere significantly less emotionally loaded because the chip aisle should be a judgment-free zone where decisions can be made in peace. 21. Requesting a simple price check at the register should be a quiet and dignified transaction between a customer and a cashier, but instead the announcement echoed across 40 feet of store in every direction, reaching the ears of complete strangers who immediately turned to look. Every person within range now had full knowledge of exactly which item was being questioned and what that said about the budget being worked with that day. A complaint was filed requesting that price checks be handled discreetly through a handheld device because public financial exposure is not part of the shopping agreement. 22. Standing at the deli counter and asking for approximately 1 pound of turkey should have come with a little wiggle room and a touch of personality from the person behind the glass. Instead, exactly 1 pound was sliced with surgical precision and handed over without a single gram of spontaneity. The whole point of saying approximately 1 pound was to leave space for a small, delightful surprise in either direction. A complaint was filed stating that the deli counter needs to relearn the art of human interaction because precise measurements killed the experience entirely. 23. Purchasing reusable bags from the checkout display seemed like a responsible and mature decision right up until the walk across the parking lot when the realization hit that carrying them would make a very specific statement to the outside world. The bags were loud green with environmental slogans printed across both sides in large, bold lettering. A complaint was filed stating that reusable bags should come in neutral colors that allow shoppers to make environmentally conscious choices without being visually recruited into a movement they were not fully prepared to publicly represent. 24. A product that had been purchased loyally and consistently for 20 straight years was sitting on its usual shelf with a bright yellow new label slapped directly across the front of the packaging. Nothing about it looked different. Nothing about it smelled different. Everything about that label felt like an existential threat to the established routine, and a quiet panic set in somewhere between the product being picked up and placed into the basket. A complaint was filed asking the store to explain what exactly changed and why nobody was personally informed beforehand. 25. Every single item on the shopping list happened to be located in a different corner of the store, requiring a complete lap of the entire building just to gather a handful of basic groceries. The path from the milk to the bread to the eggs covered enough ground to qualify as a light cardio session. A complaint was filed stating that the store layout is clearly and deliberately designed to maximize customer exposure to products they never intended to purchase, and that this constitutes a calculated psychological attack on anyone arriving with a budget. 26. Sneezing once near the salad bar brought an employee appearing from seemingly nowhere within 4 seconds, carrying a cloth and wearing an expression of serious concern. The response time was genuinely impressive, and honestly a little alarming. A complaint was filed pointing out that this exact level of urgency and attentiveness should be applied to actual customer service requests, because waiting 7 minutes for help finding the soup section while staff materialized instantly for a sneeze represents a deeply misaligned set of priorities within the store's operational structure. 27. Homemade is a word that carries a very specific promise of love, simplicity, and someone's grandmother stirring a pot on a Sunday afternoon. The soup being sold under that exact description in the hot foods section had an ingredient list stretching across 40 words, including xanthan gum appearing twice, and sodium phosphate making a quiet appearance near the bottom. A complaint was filed stating that this level of chemical involvement disqualifies anything from being called homemade, and that the sign needs to be changed before another unsuspecting customer gets emotionally misled by cursive writing on a chalkboard. 28. 4 feet of receipt paper came rolling out of the register at the end of a grocery transaction that involved maybe 20 items at most. The wallet immediately refused it. The jacket pocket could not contain it. Rolling it back up and carrying it like a tiny scroll was the only remaining option available. A complaint was filed stating that producing this volume of paper for a routine shopping trip shows complete disregard for the physical limitations of normal human beings, and that a simple digital receipt option should be available without requiring a loyalty card enrollment. 29. Lactose intolerance is a real condition that affects a significant portion of the population, and yet the sample station near the deli was handing out cheese-loaded crackers to every passing shopper without asking a single question about dietary restrictions. The cracker was halfway to the mouth before the aged cheddar became visible. A complaint was filed stating that sample station staff need proper training on ingredient announcements before extending anything toward a customer, because assuming everyone in the store can safely consume dairy is a dangerous and inconsiderate approach to free food distribution. 30. Arriving at a store with a carefully written list and leaving without 3 of the items on it created a specific kind of failure that lingered well into the evening. The items were not exotic or unusual in any way, and should have been sitting in their usual spots without any drama whatsoever. A complaint was filed stating that incomplete inventory directly damages customer confidence and creates a spiral of self-doubt that has no place in what should be a simple and straightforward weekly grocery experience for a functioning adult. 31. Approaching the customer service desk with a legitimate concern and being greeted by a manager who looked young enough to still be deciding on a college major was not the authoritative experience that was expected or deserved. The conversation that followed felt less like a resolution and more like a group project where one person clearly had no idea what was happening. A complaint was filed stating that managerial staff should carry themselves with enough presence and experience to make customers feel heard rather than like they accidentally wandered into a high school internship program. 32. The parking lot speed bumps positioned between the entrance and the main road destroyed an entire coffee that had been carefully balanced in the cup holder during what was supposed to be a smooth and uneventful exit from the premises. The cup launched. The lid failed. The situation was irreversible. A complaint was filed stating that speed bumps and hot beverages are fundamentally incompatible and that the store has a responsibility to either remove the bumps nearest the exit or install a warning sign advising customers to secure all drinks before rolling forward. 33. Wandering through the produce section and casually sampling a few grapes to assess quality before committing to a full bunch felt like a completely reasonable and time-honored grocery tradition that nobody should have to explain to anyone. The grapes were evaluated honestly and found lacking, so the bunch was returned to the display without purchase. Being charged for the tested grapes at checkout felt like a profound injustice. A complaint was filed stating that tasting before buying is a basic consumer right, and that billing for rejected produce is genuinely outrageous. 34. Grabbing a single item from the very back corner of an oversized supermarket and realizing the walk back to the register covered enough ground to qualify as a legitimate hiking trail was not part of the plan for that afternoon. The store map posted near the entrance did absolutely nothing to prepare anyone for the sheer physical commitment involved in retrieving 1 jar of peanut butter. A complaint was filed requesting that stores of this size either provide shuttle carts or reimburse customers for the unexpected athletic experience they were enrolled into without consent. 35. The store brand macaroni and cheese box sitting on the shelf featured a photograph of a family gathered around a dinner table, laughing together with what could only be described as suspicious levels of joy over a bowl of pasta. No family actually looks like that during a weeknight dinner, and using that image to sell a budget product felt deeply dishonest. A complaint was filed stating that the packaging constitutes false advertising because it sets an emotional standard for mealtime that the product itself absolutely cannot deliver regardless of how much butter gets added. 36. Watermelon selection is a serious and respected skill that requires the ability to knock on the fruit and listen carefully for exactly the right hollow sound before making any commitment. The display at this particular store had the watermelons stacked so tightly against each other that getting a proper knocking angle was physically impossible without causing a structural collapse. A guess was made. The guess was wrong. The watermelon was hollow in all the wrong ways, and a complaint was filed holding the store fully responsible for creating conditions that made proper selection completely impossible. 37. Standing in aisle 7 for several minutes, waiting patiently for assistance while watching staff members walk past without making eye contact was already a frustrating experience before the intercom suddenly announced a cleanup required in aisle 7 loud enough for the entire store to hear. Every nearby shopper immediately turned to look with expressions ranging from concern to mild suspicion. Nothing had been spilled. Nothing had been broken. A complaint was filed stating that announcing a cleanup in the exact aisle where a customer is standing creates an unfair and deeply uncomfortable public implication. 38. Signing up for the store loyalty card felt like a reasonable trade at the time because the discounts were genuinely good and the points added up quickly over a few months of regular shopping. The realization arrived slowly that every single purchase was being recorded, analyzed, and probably filed somewhere under a profile that knew the dietary habits better than most family members did. A complaint was filed stating that being monitored by a rewards card that was voluntarily signed up for creates a specific kind of paranoia that no discount is large enough to justify. 39. Picking up a slice of pizza from the hot foods section and taking a confident bite without any hesitation resulted in a burn severe enough to make both eyes water simultaneously in the middle of the store. The pizza was hot in the way that only something sitting under a heat lamp for the right amount of time can be, and there was absolutely no verbal warning offered by any staff member in the vicinity. A complaint was filed stating that serving food at temperatures capable of causing injury without any kind of caution announcement is a liability issue. 40. Browsing through the bread aisle, looking for a decent loaf to bring home, resulted in the discovery of a single gray hair resting on the shelf directly beside the sourdough, not inside the bread, not touching the bread, simply existing in its general vicinity, with a confidence that suggested it had been there for some time. A complaint was filed because the presence of a mysterious gray hair near the baked goods section raises serious questions about the overall hygiene standards being maintained in that aisle, and those questions deserve a formal, written response. 41. Spending good money on a beautiful bunch of flowers from the floral section only to watch every single petal drop off within 14 days of purchase has now happened enough consecutive times to establish what can only be described as a deliberate pattern. The flowers looked stunning in the store under those flattering display lights and completely defeated on the kitchen table by Thursday. A complaint was filed stating that selling flowers with a 2-week lifespan while presenting them as fresh and vibrant is a form of botanical deception that needs to be addressed immediately. 42. The cashier at Register 6 smiled warmly and asked if everything was found okay during the shopping trip, and the automatic response that came out was a confident yes before the brain had any chance to intervene and correct the record. 3 items from the list were missing. The answer was absolutely not fine. Both parties smiled and moved forward anyway, and now that unresolved lie sits somewhere between the receipt and the reusable bag, creating a low-level guilt that will follow all the way home and probably through dinner. 43. Returning a banana to the customer service desk after finding the taste genuinely disappointing felt like a completely reasonable consumer decision that should have been handled with understanding and professionalism. Instead, the staff member behind the counter explained with a completely straight face that bananas are classified as a non-returnable item under store policy. A formal complaint was filed, requesting that this policy be provided in writing on official letterhead because a store that sells fruit without offering any quality guarantee is making a very bold promise with absolutely no intention of backing it up. 44. Walking up to the butcher counter with a very specific vision for how the steak needed to be cut and explaining it in reasonable detail should have been the beginning of a collaborative and respectful culinary conversation. Instead, the response came back immediately, and without even the briefest pause for consideration, that the requested cut was simply not something that could be done. No apology, no alternative suggestion, no moment of visible regret. A complaint was filed stating that a butcher who cannot feel bad about a refusal is not providing the emotional standard this store advertises. 45. Connecting to the in-store Wi-Fi after several minutes of searching through available networks only to find it listed under the name guest felt like a quiet but unmistakable insult directed at someone who has been shopping at this location every single week for going on 4 years. Guest implies a passing stranger who wandered in off the street. A complaint was filed stating that loyal long-term customers deserve a network name that reflects their relationship with the store, and that being categorized as a guest while spending this much annually is genuinely disrespectful. 46. Reaching into the chip display and pulling out a party-size bag on a Friday evening while shopping completely alone felt perfectly fine until the long walk toward the register, when the full implications of that branding began to sink in with every single step taken. Party size communicates a very specific social scenario involving multiple people gathered together and sharing enthusiastically around some kind of celebratory occasion, and none of that was remotely on the agenda for that particular evening. A complaint was filed stating that solo shoppers deserve packaging that does not double as an unsolicited reminder of their current social situation. 47. The checkout line moved at an unexpectedly efficient pace that afternoon, leaving absolutely no time to properly evaluate the candy selection displayed along the register with the care and attention it genuinely deserved. A Snickers was right there. The decision was forming. The belt moved forward, and suddenly, the moment was gone forever. A complaint was filed stating that checkout lines should maintain a pace that allows customers to make thoughtful, impulse decisions without being rushed past the confectionery section like it means nothing, because for some people, that Snickers was the highlight of the entire trip. 48. Spending 20 minutes carefully reading every single nutrition label in the health food aisle, trying to make a responsible dietary decision, only to discover that every available option contained something problematic, was an exhausting and deeply demoralizing experience. The whole section was essentially a wall of compromises dressed up in earthy packaging and motivational typography. A complaint was filed stating that a store advertising itself as a wellness destination has a responsibility to stock at least one product that does not require a biology degree to evaluate before putting it into the basket. 49. Finishing up a frustrating shopping experience and wanting to leave behind something positive before walking out the door turned into its own separate problem when the only box mounted near the exit was labeled "Complaints" with no corresponding compliments box anywhere in sight. The intention had been to balance out the negativity with something kind and constructive. But the store made that completely impossible by only providing infrastructure for dissatisfaction. A complaint was therefore filed about the absence of a compliments box, which means the store has now received exactly the opposite of what it deserved today. And there you have it. 49 completely unhinged complaints from people who walked into a grocery store and somehow expected a 5-star resort experience with a personal butler and a formal apology from the bananas. If any of these felt uncomfortably familiar, then this is a safe space and nobody is judging. If this video made you laugh even once, then smash that like button, subscribe to BrainFumble, and turn on notifications so you never miss another episode of humanity embarrassing itself. Now tell us in the comments which complaint was the most unhinged one you heard today.